Welcome to the bold analysis. Faith Moni Odhiambo became the 51st LSK president and also the second woman to get the prestigious seat after Rachel Omamo's stint between 2001 and 2003. However, her latest decision to accept William Ruto's appointment in the Protest Victims Compensation Panel has been condemned by law fraternity. They've been taking to social media and their gatherings to demand that the LSK president steps down from her position. And according to them, her accepting that seat, or rather the president's job, is a betrayal of the core mandate of the Law Society of Kenya. They see Faith's decision to work with President Ruto as a capture of LSK, demanding a U-turn, a resignation, if it can come their way. Ladies and gentlemen, in this podcast, we are going to reveal to you the deep plan by the president to capture LSK ahead of the 2027 contest. What happened? Did money exchange hands? And what exactly is behind all this? This is your podcast. And as I always tell you, I've done a good job. So subscribe and click the notification bell so that you will get more analysis on this. I know we've had so many other podcasts on this, but in the bold, I guarantee you there is something new that you've not had, and you'll get it here.
A big shame on you to Faith Odhiambo. You have chosen the few millions of shillings in sitting allowances that you would earn over the great honor that Kenyans had bestowed upon you. Every lawyer knows that when an individual is murdered, the primary and core form of justice is criminal accountability of the perpetrators through criminal prosecution to punish those wrongdoers. In fact, in such a case, compensation is not a form of justice. Compensation is a very secondary remedy that does not directly address the act of violence or the root cause of injustice. The saddest part about this is that there were hundreds of victims who wanted to institute proceedings to claim for compensation, but they could not do it because they lacked postmortem results from the government, and the government deliberately refused to do it because there were orders from above. So how do you claim that you want to compensate victims while you are the one who was impeding the process of getting a data or a number of people who were affected by the same protest? There's no justification that Faith Odhiambo has, because I remember she was appointed as a member of the Public Debt Audit Committee, and she rightfully declined because she stated that it usurped the role of the Auditor General and it was unconstitutional.
That was one of the advocates reacting, and his argument is about the legality of that victims compensation panel. By then, there is a victim compensation bill. That bill is somewhere. If it is not in judiciary, it's still somewhere in parliament corridors. So that is just one of the reactions that have been going viral. But Kenyans really feel the problem started here. When Faith was vying for that position, the fact that it normally takes a high political lobbying so that politicians are aligned with the person that takes over that position. It really takes a huge campaign from Odinga, Kalonzo, and other players for Faith to beat other LSK vice presidents that were seeking, that were competing against her. That is Caroline Kamende and Harriet Njeri Boshe. So state have always had deep interest. I just saw a tweet, a post from Nelson Harvey saying, this one here, NC swallowed, ODM swallowed, LSK swallowed. Next. That is the name of it. But you need to look at it this way. I don't know why it is normally the interest of the state to have LSK under their wraps. I've tried to look at the stint of Nelson Harvey. Nelson Harvey with LSK was the 49th LSK president. Then after Nelson Harvey, it was Eric Deuri. Then after Eric Deuri, Faith took over from Eric. So Nelson Harvey was part of the, and went live on camera, and being that despite that he was in LSK, but was part of the legal team that worked with the then Deputy President William Ruto to litigate against the BBI that was being championed by Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. Nelson Harvey will then become Ruto's political ally for 2022 elections and faced off current Westlands MP Tim Wanyonyi, but he lost to Tim Wanyonyi, who was vying through ODM, and Nelson Harvey was on UDA ticket. Of course, after that, he was given some chairmanship in some retirement benefit authority. So you can see how he was used by that time. And this is the video of, I think, him in 2020.
People of Kenya intended a dichotomy between a parliamentary and a popular initiative. A popular initiative, if you look at the Bomas draft and how it progressed, is supposed to be an initiative of the people. Now, in the social contract, we have those who govern and those who are governed. Those who govern have demarcated themselves into three categories. We have the executive, we have the legislature, and we have the judiciary.
So you will understand that the history of politicians always wants to infiltrate. Now, it must be noted that President Ruto has been pursuing faith. In July 2024, immediately after the J2024 protest, William Ruto formed a committee known as Debt. That committee is even defunct. It's called Debt Auditing Committee. And he picked Faith for the job, and Faith rejected it. Faith rejected it. So at that time, it was blatantly clear that it was betrayal of the people, because she was in the forefront fighting for justice. And it must be understood that now her decision to take this has now triggered the rejection call from now a section of Kenyan. She was a section of Kenya. And of course, I don't know why I saw some fellows defending that decision and say, those who are criticizing the LSK president for working with William Ruto, of course, they're saying it is because Raila is also there, and so she's just getting that backlash. But I want to listen to this. Just listen to this video when, and this was after the brutal killing of Albert Ojwang.
Any action by police officers that does not only undermine the rights of any person, but worse, still discloses such abuse and contempt for due process, as in the case of Albert, can neither be condoned nor justified. The treatment of Mr. Albert Ojwang is a betrayal against him and a betrayal against the people of Kenya. This cannot be wished away as an isolated incident, because it is illustrative of deeper systematic weaknesses within the National Police Service. Kenya has no room for extrajudicial killings and criminal conduct by police. This is a past for which too much has been sacrificed to unshackle our country from. While we note the efforts by the Inspector General in interdicting officers believed to have been involved in the conspiracy, Albert's death, to pave way for investigation, the same is far from sufficient in resolving the matter.
Her statement on behalf of LSK on that killing. So question is this. Now as things stand, if God forbid, we are not praying for so, but if another Albert Ojwang case arises, How will she handle it? Lawyers in the House, how will she handle it? If another case like so happens. So you will understand why the lawyers are raising some conflict of interest here. And it's a matter that cannot be left unchecked. And to confirm to you that it is in the interest of President Ruto for this move, President Ruto and Raila Odinga, today, on Sunday, the Standard had a headline on losing faith. Immediately today, like MCK, Media Council of Kenya, is defending faith from the Standard headline published on Sunday.
The uproar began with the Standard newspaper's front page headline "Losing Faith," a stinging editorial portrayal of Faith Odhiambo as a leader who had crossed the line from critic of government excesses to a participant in an enterprise led by the administration she once opposed. The Media Council of Kenya responded swiftly, and I quote, "The criticism against Faith Odhiambo is unwarranted, unjustified, and in bad faith." But the defense has raised even more questions than the accusations it sought to counter, with the critics arguing that the council's voice came from the State House. This is Nelson Harvey, former LSK president.
It has been originated from the executive. It's not a statement of the Media Council of Kenya. Have you ever seen the Media Council of Kenya come up with a statement of this kind before? They don't. That is why I think in my tweet earlier in the day, I listed the institutions that have been captured. Perhaps we could list the Media Council of Kenya as one of the institutions that have now been effectively captured by the executive.
Odhiambo had built her reputation during the Gen Z protest when she defended abducted demonstrators, rushed to court to file petitions at midnight, and confronted police abuses head-on. But many questions are here. As a defender of human rights, how do you accept a call from a government that tells police officers to shoot demonstrators in the leg?
So mtu ambaye anaenda kuchoma biashara ya mtu mwingine, mtu ambaye anachukua moto, anaenda kuchoma biashara ya mtu, anaenda kuchoma mali ya watu wengine, mtu kama huyo apigwe risasi miguu, aende hospitali, akienda kotini.
Do you realize MCK is Media Council of Kenya? That is under state. That is funded by the state. When you see Media Council charged to come out on Sunday to issue a presser defending faith, how urgent? Sunday. Watu wanafaa kuwa hata wanaomba. Do you see how the state was out to defend that decision for her to work in that commission? And that has created a little bit of an uproar because people are demanding answers that how did it get here? At this point, I want us to, there is some interesting part that no one is paying attention to. No one is paying attention to that part. The country is only talking about faith this, faith that. I want to look at that aspect, but before it, I was looking at some information that was coming out that, it was in the interest of Raila for faith to cross over, to join William Ruto. There is no second argument about it. And while within the Odhiambo ranks, of course, this move, a section of lawyers, and including James Orengo, are amongst the lawyers that are opposing the move for faith to cross over and take that position. However, it really comes out that the lobbying and for her to be convinced, it took a high-profile delegation that probably could have even visited with some inducements so that she can be convinced to make a way there. And one thing that is so sinister about it is why there was really pushing. And of course, I'm going to answer that. I need to say, if you compare Faith with her predecessor, the predecessor, Eric Deuri, many times, LSK goes on the side of opposition. Even Nelson Harvey, when Nelson Harvey was with William Ruto was actually on the opposition. So for the first time, the body that is supposed to fight for justice, access to justice and constitutionalism in the country is sitting the oppressor. And now, in fact, even the move to work under that panel has really been questioned. We are going to look at that. Now, there's something that I told you that not many have paid attention to. Even the media, the mainstream media, have not paid attention to it. And people really have to feel to see why the president and President Ruto and Raila Odinga went out hunting for faith. You may want to take a minute and look at the composition of that panel. Who else is in that panel? Apart from Makau Mutua. Of course, the chair, Makau Mutua, was already assigning. He was signed some time back to work under President, something constitutional affairs there. So that's already a Raila ally that has been brought there. That's already a Raila ally. I wanted to look at some members of that panel. Former Solicitor General Kennedy Ogeto. Of course, he's been in the court corridors. He has been a state officer, was a state officer. So take some box there. But I wanted to look at Hilton Irungu. Hilton Irungu is the executive director of Amnesty International. And I remember he once made some. He was also very vocal and really came out loudly to tell off the state at the height of Gen Z killing. I have seen people making some argument that, guys, the criticism of faith is just based on his tribe, on the tribe. Why are we not asking about Hilton Irungu? By the way, I need to tell you this. Amnesty International is also a human rights body, was targeted for that. So why do you think is a faith? You have Hilton Irungu, targeting civil society. Another name also targeting civil society is Churchill Sober. Churchill Sober. So I've put faith here. Faith is in the middle, then Irungu Hilton is the guy, then Churchill Sober. So Churchill Sober is the executive director of the Kenyan National Civil Society Center. Let me tell you, compensation. Who are the protests were members of the public. But William Ruto and the NIS know that civil society groups have been supporting that cause or have been part and parcel of that public agitation against the state. Now they have been brought on board at this point. Do you know what this will lead to? And I tell you, that panel will collapse before it even achieves its mandate. Do you know what it leads to? William Ruto is going to bring up some laws and legislation that would even touch on regulating civil society organizations. That will come at some point. Do you realize that apart from LSK, civil society was a big target for the state? So you at this point, you need to wonder, you need to coordinate, join the dot. You go for LSK, you go for civil society. Then you see all these were targeting to suppress the voices that were talking on matters Gen Z.
Collectively, we would just want to emphasize that it is not dialogue that produces the change that the Gen Z movement want. It is decisive action. Many of the issues that they have raised, issues around corruption, bloated cabinet, the issues around defunding essential services like education, health, agriculture. These are issues that are within the purview of the national administration, and the president has executive powers to take actions on this. We saw him take those actions on the taxation bill last week. We heard last night that he is reconsidering a number of things that relate to the Gen Z demands, and we would just call on him to essentially take action on these, even as the national dialogue continues. But I think for us, our main point is that much of this is within the power of the presidency and his cabinet to take action, and they should just do that.
Dr. Duncan Ojwang, this gentleman has come here. Amekubali this appointment. But just last month, he was appointed by President to lead Kenya Human Rights Commission and declined. Do you think, unaona sasa alikuwa anatafutiwa nafasi? Another interesting one I want us to pay attention to is Raphael Anampiu. Raphael Anampiu is already a state player. You remember in February, CS Oparanya appointed a 9-member committee to oversee Nairobi Coffee Exchange transition. Amongst the names in that committee that Oparanya named, as you see here, Jackie Muia, Amos Mamboleo, Irene Kabochi, Roslyn Chepkuri, and Karin Kabochi ni mtoto wa ile Kabochi, Luka Rotich, Job Kihumba, and Raphael Anampiu and Elfas Tarus were named as members of the committee. So don't you see this is already someone who had been an insider? And I'm not so sure kama still the other committees operating, but you can see the way he also picked on picking some of the factors that were considered. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I know this is the part that all of us were waiting. Why do you think Ruto and Raila Odinga were hunting for Faith Moni Odhiambo? It is this for reasons. LSK is the target here. And LSK is being used to legitimize cash compensation as the justice for those families. Remember that the custodians of most of these cases, like Albert Ojwang case, for it to go through, and that's why people are talking about conflict of interest. LSK is supposed to represent some of these victims in court. Rex case is still going on. Albert Ojwang case is still going on. Now, the same person who is representing you in court is the same person sitting somewhere deciding how much money and when it should be given as a victim. Is this person going to push justice? And so clearly, this would legitimize it, because remember, the public discourse is that money, and not even public discourse, it is the reality. It doesn't matter how much money you give someone, it cannot restore life. Money cannot return life lost. That's truth. So this LSK acquisition is supposed to legitimize it. And I'm looking, probably one of the interviews that Faith will have after. That's why there are calls for her to make a U-turn and drop from that bid. And we are told he's under pressure, and at the right time could probably make the move to resign from Ruto's job at any time due to public pressure. The other thing I'm seeing is this. Faith Odhiambo's visibility during Gen Z protests and his aura, and I think President Ruto realized, if he would be left to continue on that path, she was amongst the most prominent personalities that would easily be adopted by the Gen Z population. And to that effect, probably captured by the young leaders coming. Look at the Babu winners. I'm a bit convinced. If things was to stand as they are, and Faith decides to go for Nairobi Senate, she will really give the opponent a run for money. She will really give that opponent a run for money. If she gets a good camp with Babu, Sifuna, probably even she goes for Nairobi Women Rep, which I don't think a position will go for. Even go for an MP here in this city. Standing with that Gen Z population, they will really troop to support her. Because the truth be told, she really, really supported the Gen Z. So I think the president realized we need to destroy Faith. And that one of the tools to destroy the hammer was these victims and compensation. They were really looking for her. They tried the auditing one, so they were really looking for her for this. So this move was to destroy her, to plaque her, and it is part of the wider scheme to scuttle that thing called Gen Z. I'm a bit scared. You know, I've always had people talking to me in the formal. Of course, people came in. You know, this thing Gen Z, you will realize in 2027, no one will be talking about it. So once you get to talk about tribe, and probably said it there. And the other thing is, state is looking for protests data. This why LSK imekuja. LSK ndio iko na cases mingi hizi vitu. Kuna cases mingi sana. And this is to scuttle any evidence that could be gathered by these civil society organizations and other non-state players that could form a formidable case for an ICC or any other international body that could pursue. And that is why they've been brought on the side of the state. Remember, even the US is conducting its own investigations. So it is at this that is coming. And you know the plan? At this panel, the state will create many inducements, very huge allowance with some good tenders and, you know, good privileges. They'll be trapped. There is money. Through this platform, people will be given money so that they submit the state demand. That's my take.